Welcome, my lovely edge dwellers. Lucca Hallex here, power sorcerer, and welcome to my She Who Knows podcast slash blog slash vlog, because it depends on my mood whether it's going to come out in writing or just in audio or video as we're doing today. So today, obviously, is a vlog one, and I call this She Who Knows because I used to have a client many years ago, a coaching client who used to call me "She Who Knows" because I was using my intuition as I was working with him. And so he would, when it was our appointment time, he would call me up and he'd say "she," and I would say "he." And we jokingly said, that I'm "She Who Knows," not because I know everything, but because he could ask me questions and I would connect into all of the higher level of me and him and find answers. So that's kind of how I see the world, is that if we can find the question, we can find the answers. And sometimes we get the answers ahead of the questions. We don't really understand what we've got until we find the right question. So since the beginning of the pandemic, before that really, but really it stuck during the pandemic, was I was looking for community. And we were all locked up in our houses and in our individual gardens and on our balconies, and we didn't have that much contact. And so I started a community on Patreon that I call Lucca's Edge Dweller Community. And edge dwellers to me are the people who are at the edges of the paradigm. They're the people who don't quite fit the box. And I don't even think that there's anything wrong with the box. The box just isn't a comfortable place for me to live. So, and I don't mean anything disparaging about the box either. It's just that there are, as we go through the world, all of us as humanity, we have leading edges where we change and learn and grow. And there are some people who are more comfortable out there on those edges, and there are other people who are more comfortable in the mainstream. And the mainstream really is what makes our society tick, right? So I've always been one of those people who's out there on the edge. And the interesting thing about people being out there on the edge is that we don't know how many of us there are, because we're facing out into the unknown, generally speaking. We don't spend a whole lot of time looking at what's going on in the mainstream. And we're spread out all along the edges. So there was a guy in the US in the 80s who wrote a book about strategic planning. And it had a number of stories in it. And one of the stories that he worked with was called the deviant bee story. And what he found out, and I don't know how he found it out now, I don't remember, but he was talking about how in a beehive, there's a certain number of bees who won't go where they're told. So a bee will come back into the hive and it'll do its little dance that shows all the other bees where to go, where to fly to find the next source of pollen. And about roughly 20% of the bees won't go. They're deviant bees. They won't go where they're told. And they're the ones who are really necessary because they find the next source of pollen. Because if the bees kept just going back to the same place, they would exhaust that supply and then they'd all die because they wouldn't have any more pollen. So I see those of us who are happy and sometimes not so happy edge dwellers, because sometimes it can be frustrating and lonely and that kind of thing. I see us as the forerunners of, and not necessarily because we have all the answers, but because we have a lot of the questions. So we're sitting out there on the edge and we're saying, well, this doesn't work for me. I wonder what would happen if I did this. And I wonder what would happen if I did that. So I know you're one of those people. And for many years, I co-hosted a radio show on CJSF Radio, which is the community campus and community radio station at Simon Fraser University. And Stephanie, you came on the show, and we talked a lot about how what you were doing in the world was different. So to all of you edge dwellers who are listening to this, welcome to this this vlog, and welcome to Stephanie Ostler. whose name is right in the corner of the screen, so you can see how it's spelled. It's my great pleasure to have you here today, and I want to say that our conversation today is loose. It's conversational. It's like you would have if you were sitting in a cafe, which I couldn't manage to fit into my schedule just at the moment, and it's a little quieter if we do it this way because we don't have to compete with cafe noise. But I'm delighted to have you here and to find out because this particular series that I'm playing in at the moment is called Conversations at Our Learning Edge. So I'm really curious to find out from everybody, not one of these who are you and what do you do for a living kinds of conversations, although that may play into it as well. But the conversation that's about what are you learning about right now? What's stretching you? What's intriguing you? What are you finding is taking you into uncharted territory? I used to have on my website this really, really old map that was all sort of sepia toned, and it reminded me of in the olden times when they'd create maps, they only knew about a certain amount of the world. So when they got to the edge of what they knew about, they'd say beyond this point there be dragons. And I to me that's like kind of the edge. It's the edge of what we know. And of course it's different for everybody. My learning edge is not the same as everybody else's. But I also think society has a learning edge as well.
Mhm.
And out there on that learning edge are all of us who are the edge dwellers who are exploring things. So, so welcome. And I noticed that you're knitting there, and I was asking you about your knitting, and then I thought, no, I should save that for when we're actually broadcasting because I think it's so interesting. I would love to know. The question I was going to ask you before we even started, and I buttoned my mouth was, how long have you been knitting? What got you into knitting in the first place?
I I wanted to learn knitting since I was such a young little girl. I got into my mom's craft supplies, and she was not a crafter. She's very creative, but not in the sewing sense. But she had all of the materials to do so because she had tried once upon a time and hadn't gotten rid of it.
Yeah.
And as a very young girl, I would get into it. She hated that I get into it, but it was the biggest, best secret in the house I could find. And all of her knitting was triangles. She'd never figured out how to keep the same stitch count. So either they were reduced triangles or increase in triangles. But pardon me, I found some knitting books at a very young age. I must have been in about grade 1 or 2 because I remember that my mom got me knitting lessons. I'd been knitting for a while, not very well, but by grade 4, my mom got me knitting lessons with an older lady who lived in the seniors home near our house.
Yeah.
And I was so embarrassed for anybody to know that I was going to knitting lessons after school and learning how to knit while watching Jeopardy. But yeah, I always.
Wow. And you were learning from a pro.
Well, I was very self-taught for the first 3 or 4 years or whatever it was. I'm not really sure, but
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't very good knitting at all. But yeah, I was learning from a pro. She taught me how to hold it properly, and I've been doing it ever since. And it really got me through high school. I'm hyperactive. The world goes too slow for me, and if I can knit, it just calms that energy down. So, it's like fidget spinners or other kids that need to wiggle or run around the room.
Yeah.
I can sit here and do this. And because I don't find people talk fast enough for me, I don't find conversations go fast enough for me, and nothing wrong with anybody.
Oh
I'm just
no.
very hyperactive.
Yeah.
I'm a hummingbird.
You are. I can
Yeah.
totally see that. So and I notice that you don't have to look at it. I
No,
mean, glance
no,
down
when
every
you
once in a while, but you don't have to look at it.
No, I've spent the vast majority of my life knitting, and I liken it to Braille. I liken it to typing on a keyboard. You don't need to look when you do those things. You can feel when your finger does something wrong. Like I can feel the texture. It's a rib knit, which is one knit, one purl, one knit, one purl, and you just feel when something goes wrong. You rightfully pointed out if I was doing some sort of lace work, I'd have to count, but
Yeah, yeah.
it really, I think that if everyone discover every one of my hyperactive brothers and sisters discovered something akin to knitting, it would help them get through life a lot better. And whether it's fidget spinners or something productive.
There was there was a time at which they started introducing this idea to corporate executives, especially when they were
Brilliant.
sitting around in departure lounges in airports and that kind of thing. And they started traveling around with their bags of knitting. And I think it's a brilliant idea. I mean, why should it be relegated to women or little old women? Like we wear knitted things all the time, right? So why
Yeah.
not knit them? So what are you knitting
Well,
right
and
now?
I wanted to say the history of knitting is not gender exclusive.
No?
That's why fishermen sweaters were often knit by fishermen while they were on the boat. Soldiers, military men often knit when they were just deployed because it was the only way to get socks and sweaters and fix things. I think we're so detached by production commercialism that we don't understand that people actually had to make things. And if
Yeah.
there was no one, no woman there to make it, the men were making it for themselves. And the gender separation of duties and responsibilities came out of necessity of an organization of a household. Frankly, the only reason that knitting became generally a female uh, project was because women would stay at the home with the babies and be doing that because that was the most appropriate thing for the childbearing person,
Yeah.
whereas the men were out plowing
Yeah.
fields or doing a job or off at war, and so it so many of our gender jobs have only become that way based on circumstance, and I think that
So,
it's sort of
and then we got fixed
sad that we
into it and used it as a
yeah,
prescription, but it didn't start that way and it doesn't need to be that way.
no, and even to have such a negative connotation around gender roles is really not taking into account historical realities that we just don't have anymore. Women can go work out of the house. We're not constantly pregnant. We have birth control. We can choose when we have babies. We're living much, much, much longer lives. You know,
Yes.
even just transportation is different. We have such a different system that we shouldn't really make enemies of so-called gender roles or even the history of gender roles so much as we need to appreciate why they came about and even more so appreciate why we've evolved away from those gender roles. That's so fantastic.
Oh
It's something
yeah.
to celebrate.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be able to express ourselves, all of us express ourselves in whatever way
Yeah.
feels right for each of us and feels right at different times in our lives. So one of the things I was going to ask you is when in your life have you been on learning edges? And you just described one, right? I mean, when you learned to knit, that was a learning edge. And you were
Yeah, well, it's funny
secret. Sorry.
when you were asking what I'm knitting, it actually is appropriate to answer that in regards to my learning edge. I just finished my master's. Don't have the certificate in hand, but I might go through the convocation on May 10th. And
That's so great.
I'm so I was doing a lot of practice for my thesis, actually making things relevant to my thesis and reading a lot of papers. And ever since I shipped the last draft, all I want to make are toques. I can't tell you why. I want to just make little tiny projects. Everyone's getting a toque. It's just a fun, cheap and cheerful thing to do.
Yeah.
I have not been able to read a paper or a book. I'm
Oh yeah.
just doom scrolling the internet just for visual. And then I spoke to a girl I went to university with who graduated with me, and she mirrored the same expression that ever since she sent in her final draft, she has not been able to focus on anything deep and meaningful. So
Yeah.
I'm taking a break.
Yes. But also, I find that when my hands are engaged in something,
Yeah.
it lets my brain float off somewhere else. And it doesn't matter if it's washing
Exactly.
dishes or ironing or driving, right?
Yeah.
It's my body's
Yeah.
fully engaged in something, and my brain can kind of go. And that is deep and
Exactly.
meaningful in interesting ways.
Yeah, well, and it helped me get through my master's because I really struggle to sit down. I love reading. I adore reading. And my partner laughs that I'll always say, I have this quote from a book. I don't remember what the book is called. And he laughs at me. He says, of course, you don't remember what the book is called. You're reading 5 books at a time. But I always have something from a book. And it really helps me focus because just with the speed of my mind, even my eyeballs reading a page, I'm a very fast reader, but it doesn't go fast enough to keep me engaged. So if I'm knitting, or likewise if I'm on a treadmill or on like a Peloton or something, I can get that energy out so I can actually just focus and read. And it's the same thing as conversations. because you've said only a few things so far, and I've got 30 answers already. We could be here for hours just talking about
Yes.
my response.
Well, that's my favorite kind of conversation because it means that there's more to mine and we can
Yeah.
poke around some more. So this begs the question, what is on your learning edge right now? Because you've just, I mean, your master's program was a learning edge. Must have been.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, my learning edge last time we talked, I was talking about my retail stores. I had 3 retail stores over 2 cities, and we were making everything in Vancouver ethically and sustainably, well,
Mm.
aspiringly sustainably. I'm very conflicted with that terminology.
Yeah.
Um, but I closed my last store during COVID, and part of it was because I don't want to be part of the problem making tons of product, but I do want to continue making my work as an artist because obviously I can't stop and I want to make beautiful things in the world.
Yeah.
But I don't want to make volume.
Yeah.
And I still need to work. And in 2018, I started teaching at post-secondary, which actually triggered me going back to school myself as I witnessed my students' growth. So I went and got a master's, and it was just highly compatible for me to continue teaching at post-secondary while I was going through the master's program. That's not unusual for a master's student.
Yeah.
And so now I'm teaching 7 classes at Langara, which is more than a full course load for a teacher. And I love, the high energy. 7 classes is the perfect number of classes for me to teach at a time.
Yeah.
And learning from students. Like I don't know who gets more out of being in class, me or them.
Well, I've always said that teaching is a bidirectional, omnidirectional process.
Yeah, it
I
absolutely is.
can't I learn by teaching and I teach by learning.
Yes.
Whatever I learn, I pass along, and in passing it along, I learn more, which also needs to be passed along. So it's like a farm. You're constantly going into the next season, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. It's been a tremendous learning curve. And, every time I start getting things really nailed down with some aspects in specific courses I'm teaching them, they throw me new courses, or those courses aren't going to be taught for a few months. And I'm just, it's been a huge learning curve. Even dealing with this institution, I haven't really been so embedded into LaSalle previously. So every institution has its own way of teaching, its own methodology. And it's been great. It's really been fascinating. I adore learning. It's my favorite feeling in the
What are you
world.
learning from the students?
What am I learning from the students?
Yeah.
Oh my God. So I have 7 courses. When you say that, the first thing that comes to mind is I'm teaching 2 sections of a course called Fundamentals in Sustainability. And it's part of the arts department. And what's really interesting about it is every single student in both those classes, I almost have 50 between the 2 cohorts.
Yeah.
They're all from someone else. So discussing sustainability through the lens of people from all over the world has been absolutely fascinating. And every sustainability course I've ever taught, there have been people from all over the world. But in this case, I'm the only Canadian. And it's been such to learn about people's experiences from other countries to such a large degree. That's just been incredible. I have deepened my own practice in a lot of ways, learning from students when I am teaching about product development, or I teach entrepreneurship, and I'm developing course content for entrepreneurship right now. And it's been really fun to see the ideas they come up with, because they're moving into a new paradigm that, I realize after having a business for 20 years, you have to reinvent your business every 15 or so years, because the paradigm shift is so great at that point that the framework you created for the first 15 years does not actually carry into the next consecutive 15 years. And that's one of the reasons I closed my stores, because I did feel about 5 years ago that the writing was on the wall for retail, and it may be user experience, but we were not going to be doing most of our shopping in person. Maybe we'd go there to see new things, but not necessarily to bring them home with us. And so I didn't at the time want to get rid of all of my stores, but I began closing them in response. And then over COVID just rushed that whole process so quickly.
Yeah.
I just wanted to close stores, because I can't give 100% of my attention to 2 separate channels.
Yeah.
And so I closed the retail because I was giving 80% to that and 20% to retail, or to online. And so I can tip the scale start focusing on things like social media conversations and how I can do this differently. And my master's really gave me a new entry point into how to storytell and connect with customers. I'm really excited. But I'm calling this my sabbatical. I'm on a sabbatical for my company right now because I have done it my entire adult life. And I need a little bit of a break. But yeah, my students teach me new directions. It's actually really exciting watching them inform me about where my company should go next. Even, you know, communication skills. They teach me a lot of communication skills. I'm a bit of a people pleaser, and it's really interesting to stand up in front of students and have to be really blunt with them and know that I'm not going to be their favorite person in the world all the time, because it's more important that they're getting appropriate feedback than that they're getting the feedback they want. You know, what do we not learn?
Oh God, yes, yes. Are you learning things about how they are students as opposed to how you were a student the last time you were in an educational setting?
I I didn't, you know, after I graduated high school, I launched my business. So I actually don't have an undergrad, which is very interesting. I went straight into a master's program.
Yeah.
So it's been so long since I was a student. And I never really wanted to be a teacher because I really hated the experience of being high school so much. So more than anything, I'm learning that there's a massive difference between the experience of being a high school student and being a teacher, a university teacher. It's a like
Yeah.
radically different
Yeah.
different job.
Yeah, but you do have, I mean, as an entrepreneur, because I
Mm.
helped to um, create all of the materials that they used in the venture program at BCIT, which was an entrepreneurial small business startup incubator. And
Right.
one of the things that we were trying to educate the rest of the institution about is that entrepreneurs learn by doing. Now, I would
Yes.
argue that we all do, but in
Yeah. Yeah.
particular, entrepreneurs do, and they have a very short attention span. So
Yeah.
you got
They're
to
like,
give them just enough theory so that they can do something. And from the doing, they learn and figure out what it is they want to know about next. And then you feed them that piece. But that also that it's changing all the time. So
absolutely.
so
You know,
I love this idea of learning by doing because you obviously are a learner by doing.
absolutely. You know, one thing that's really interesting that's coming to mind as you say this is how much I've been realizing recently as teaching has become my main, like my main source of work. I want to say, like, it's obviously I have a life, but like it's the
Yeah.
main thing that I
Yeah.
focus work energy on these days.
Mhm.
And I'm working. I've been called a perfectionist. I don't know if I'm a perfectionist, but I really love elevating myself. So I really constantly am in this
And
like
quality.
cycle of improvement quality. So I really want to be a better teacher all the time. I'm obsessed with it. And one thing I've really noticed with all of my students, and the majority of them are much younger than me, not to say they all are, I even have a couple that are older than me, but the majority are much younger. And especially with the younger students, what I notice is very consistent is that they need to learn. What happens is they come out of the high school system and they are taught that there's a right and wrong answer, and that's all that exists. And so we take them into the post-secondary system and we have to teach them that right and wrong doesn't exist. There's not only a gray area, but now it's your turn to do research and tell us what the answer is. And it's very uncomfortable for them to go through that shift. So my favorite project, well, I should just, instead of projects in general, I should be specific and say my favorite class that I ever have with my students that I designed was something called the absurd solution, where I have them designing outcomes based on absurdity. And you can see it. They absolutely can't stand it. The vast majority of the students will totally
So
rebel against. So uncomfortable. They can't figure out how being absurd connects with the end goal, but it absolutely does. Because if you can't get outside of, as you're talking about, the box, if you can't be an outlier, if you can't be the bee that's going and finding new sources of pollen, you also can't be an entrepreneur. And until then, you're just maybe perhaps a business owner that's just copy pasting another business model and slapping a new face on it. That's not entrepreneurship. It could be business ownership. It could be,
yeah.
being you know, like, sorry, I'm getting distracted by all these just things popped up, but yeah,
Yeah.
being a business owner, performing something that's needed in your community and solving a problem. We say we need laundromats. You can open a laundromat, and that could be an extremely good solution to the problem of no laundromats. That's great.
Yeah.
It's not entrepreneurship.
No, no.
It's not.
Entrepreneurship is doing it differently than it's ever been done before, or inventing
Yeah,
something entirely new in the like.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you've got to exercise muscle.
yeah,
Creativity is a muscle. I've done this since I
yeah,
was about 18 when I started my company, and I was struggling to come up with what the next design was I was going to make. And I would really, I would look at every piece of media, every newspaper, every magazine. I'd go to the mall, I'd go to the library, and it was really hard to come up with something.
yeah.
I'd sketch, I'd write, I'd do anything. And now I come up with so many ideas, I don't draw them because I get so frustrated that I can't make them all, which is actually it's another problem I've created. But when I'm talking, they haven't exercised creative solutions. And one of my favorite things is the conversation that comes up between, you know, in the free time. And if you don't mind me going on a bit of a tangent,
I know
I had
it's
all
great. Yeah,
this group of 5 Indian boys in one of my sustainability classes talking to me the other day, telling me how, you know, in India, all the instructors have big white beards and they'd never take me seriously, which I love. I'm breaking through a stereotype for them. So, you know, I'm coming in the back door about their expectations, which is
yes,
always great. Thing.
yes, yes.
So I'm having a conversation, and they're joking with me that I should hire them for my business, and I'm joking they'd be great at selling lingerie, and so they're telling me they're really struggling to find work. And I say, I don't understand why you're struggling to find work. There so many businesses are struggling to find people, and you're all really capable people. And they say, well, they don't like Indians. And I say, well, that's not possible. I've hired a lot of Indians, and we adore Indians. They're hard workers. They're great people, great personalities. They bring so much new energy to the company. That's not it. So what is it? And they go, well, they've got a stack of resumes this big. And I go, okay, so where is your resume in the pile? And they go, well, you know, I haven't brought one in, but like, where is it going to be anyway? And I said, okay, well, let's say you brought one in, where does it go? And they go, well, just in the pile. And I go, okay, well, how do you stand out? And they didn't really get that. They're like, I don't understand what you're saying. And I say, you know, if you want a job, you have to show that you're different than everybody else in this staff, because that's frankly all that matters. At the end of the day, they need to hire somebody. So we just went into this exercise where I go, how do you stand out? And they were really struggling. They don't know. And I say, okay, one of them has mentioned Domino's. He wants to work at Domino's. I said, great, Domino's definitely needs staff. What if you went into Domino's with an empty pizza box and your resume printed on the inside of the pizza box, and you said, hey, I'm here to speak to the manager. Here, I have a pizza for you. He opens the box and it's got a resume in it. And you say, I really want to work for your company. This is where I want to be right now. This is the growth I'm going to get out of this. And this is how hard I'm willing to work for you. Why wouldn't he give you a chance? Even if he says, I've got 30 candidates that are probably better at delivering pizza than you are, you're standing out. You're doing something that none of them are willing to do. And that's the problem, is that people aren't used to thinking outside of the box. They're not used to being the bee. Do
They
something
actually got
different.
punished for going outside the box, right? So
Yes.
you've got to have
Yes.
a certain level, I think, of I
That's a
don't
good point.
care-ness, right?
Yeah. Which I've
Because
always had.
which I've always had as well. And
Yeah.
people who don't have as much of it as I do, they look at me and I can feel them kind of, it's like somebody put ants in their clothes. That it's because I'm in a place, I'm living in a place that's comfortable for me that would be excruciatingly uncomfortable for them until they got used to it, right? Because you got to suffer through the discomfort. But to me, and I think to you, it's too
Yeah.
uncomfortable to be in the place where everybody else is that's inside the box. But
Absolutely.
I have to come out of the box. It's not until
Yeah.
I'm out of the box that I'm comfortable, but it has a whole different set of discomforts.
No, and
It's not secure.
to you. No, you're totally right. My biggest fear in the world, which will speak a lot about why my comfort is outside of the box, is that I won't change, that I will be stuck like this forever. And I'm certain that comes from having a lack of self-worth when I was younger and not really liking
Yeah.
where I was growing up at the time.
Yeah.
And so constantly, like, my biggest fear is, oh my God, this is it. This is the way I'm going to be forever. I'm not going to grow. I'm not
Is
going to
this
get out
it?
of this. So
Is this everything?
anxiety,
This is all there is.
I'm anxiety about staying still. So that's why
Yeah.
I've constantly got forward. And it's so interesting that we all face different anxieties. Yeah. And we've all got to work on that discomfort. Like sometimes I've got to be cool with where things are and just take time. My partner always reminds me, like, we're not there yet. It's okay. Just slow down.
Yeah. I was talking to a woman the other day who coaches people who are in leadership positions. And I said to her, well, what is it that you offer to these folks? Like, if I ask them what you offer, what would they say? And she said, oh, they all come to me and they tell me that they get, when they get to come and see me, it's like they get to pause. Um,
Oh, that's
and it's
beautiful.
calm, it's quiet, it's peaceful. It's not full of
Yeah.
frenetic doing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we need, like, you're coming to the end of your master's program, and then
Yeah.
there's a space, right? While you
I
think into what you're going to
have
do
to say.
next.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's a pause. I mean, the French call a coffee break or pause de café, right? A pause of coffee. Um,
That's beautiful.
and we call it a break, which is has a
Right.
whole different. I love different languages because not
Yeah.
only are there different words, but they bring a different feel, a different concept with them. And
Absolutely.
pause de café means that you actually pause, and in that pause, it's like the pause between the in breath and the out breath. Like,
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that I've always believed that we need to be working 4-day weeks. Uh,
Oh my God.
at the most.
Doing
And
that.
a 4-day week, and then you have the fifth day as your pause. And maybe in that
Yeah.
fifth day you learn, or you go out and you strengthen your social relationships, or you take care of your body, or you
Yes.
just shift out of the routine, the
Yes.
regular of the other 4 days. But
Absolutely.
and I think that when we only have 2 weeks vacation a year, it's crazy because we need 2 weeks to unwind, never mind do anything with it.
I
I
know.
like the idea of being able to take a sabbatical. They have a
Mhm.
concept in Australia where you work for 4 years and then take the fifth year off. So you work for 4 years at 80% of your salary, and then the fifth year you get off at 80% of your salary. But in that
That's how they do.
year, you can go out and do things. You can cross train in a different field. You can do self-development work. You can travel. You can go and farm if you want to. Like, but it gives us that, it allows us to be deviant within our own lives.
I love it. I love it.
The school system in Toronto, the public school system, allows teachers to go on that track if they want to. And I don't know if now they've
Really?
different government in Ontario. I don't know if they are still doing that. But a friend of mine was an elementary school teacher in Toronto for most of her career, and she would go on that track. So then she would take a year off, and she'd get a little bit more than a year because you tack the summer onto that year, right? So
Right. Oh my God.
and so she would, and we didn't live in the same city, but we grew up in the same city. So she would, when she had her year off, she could come and visit me because otherwise we could only visit one another in the summer when all the airfares were sky high. So we didn't see as much of one another. But that was, I've always thought that to institutionalize the process of allowing space for growth, for cross pollination, for experimenting, where you're not in danger of losing your job and your roof over your head if you go and try something new.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've been so blessed. I've been doing a lot of talks for students, not just as a teacher in my own classes, but I've been invited by other teachers in other classes. And I just offer to do these kind of talks all the time
Yeah.
because I have so many different avenues in life. So I just, there's always something that I can share.
Yeah.
And one thing that ends up coming out in a lot of these talks when I'm talking to students is they'll ask me about sort of like how to prepare maybe as a designer or a young person for not having a stable income. And among my responses, depending on the situation, I always preach having a lot of different paths in life, not just focusing on one thing and only having that thing be the only way that money comes to you or work comes to you or personal growth comes to you, but having multiple. And I've never, because of the way my mind works, been satisfied with doing one thing, I get very bored. So I have just so many different revenue streams that I can easily step out of one and go into another. One gets slow, I can do another. And there's just this movement around things that this one takes me this far, and then I hit sort of a wall. So then I move over here and that takes me further, and then I hit a wall, and then I move over here and that one. And so they're constantly sort of leapfrogging on each other. It's great. So I highly recommend everybody always have multiple revenue
And
streams.
project work is like that. I mean, I don't, I mean, definitely when you're teaching 7 different courses, it's like having 7 different projects. But
Yes.
my work is very much about whichever project, and I have several
Yeah.
of them going at the same time always, right? So I might be doing blogs, and I might also be developing course material over here, and over here I'm doing readings, and over here I'm doing something else. And I love having, I'm a
Yes.
Gemini, so I love having my fingers in all these different pies. Now I know people who just, it's like that makes them feel like a deer in the headlights. They wouldn't be able to focus on anything. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of this is to do with really knowing yourself, right? And
Yeah.
being able to know what happens when I get bored and I need to move on. What happens in my life when that when I get to that
I,
point?
I also want to recognize that the people who feel that they'd be overwhelmed with that, I just want to point out they actually already do multiple things, because otherwise they wouldn't
Yeah,
be
yeah,
alive.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
stop one thing, go home and read a book, and then you stop reading a book to make dinner. You stop
yeah,
making dinner and you call your
yeah.
friends. Like, that is just as much
And
different
different
things. If
hats.
there's
One hat you're wearing, you're a
hats,
partner, and another one you're a neighbor, and another one you're a friend, and another one you're the dishwasher.
yeah. And so the overwhelmment is actually just perception, not really reality, because the
Well, yeah.
reality is you're doing
I
multiple
was
things.
I was just thinking
And
that
I
when you were talking about, well, how do you prepare these students, right? But really, it's a mental preparation. It's a mental and
yeah,
spiritual preparation, right?
yeah,
It probably
totally.
fits with what you were
And
just about to say.
well, and I think what actually is tripping people up is the concept of multiple revenue streams. And I'd really ask everybody, and it will be a different reason for each person, but the reason that they have a resistance to multiple revenue streams.
Yeah.
They may not be fully comfortable with the idea of making money independently. They may have a belief that money must come from a job, or they may have a belief that income must be regular, or a belief around a maximum amount of income they make. So if one is having a barrier to multiple revenue streams, the reason I do talk about money a lot, I think you of all people would appreciate this, because
Mhm.
money is actually highly spiritual, and it will give us a lot of feedback about
And it's
ourselves. It's
energetic, right? It's an energy.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's easy to have, put on your friend's hat and go hang out with your friends, and recognize that I have no expectations of anything in return, or even just sort of that's the story we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
But to do something, expect money in return, will bring a lot of feelings up for people, and it's addressing those feelings is what we want to do. And I really think that like, I know that my money beliefs are limiting in a way. I live in an incredible, stunning, brand new house. My rent is insane. I own a car that I can drive when I need to or want to. I go on a lot of trips. I really don't feel a lack. Like, I'm not a big shopper. I don't like having a lot of things. You can probably even hear it echo in here, and you can see that I've got an empty space for TV, and it just,
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's not calling to
It's
you.
set up. They haven't removed it. I don't know what we'll do. I don't care.
You might need to put a painting
But
on it instead.
well, that's my suggestion. I do have a roommate. She's my best friend. I just believe in living in community. I think it's unhealthy to live alone for most people. So I do live with a roommate, but we just got the most gorgeous place in the world. And she thinks this is cluttered. She's like, oh my God, our house is so cluttered. We need to get rid of it. By the way, that box was there to put my laptop on. So like, she thinks our house is so cluttered. And I'm like, I think this is okay. We don't have a lot of stuff. We're good. But,
Yeah.
but I recognize own money limitations. Why am I not making $1 million? Nothing wrong with that. But money is just such a fun spiritual game to play. Like, recognize where you're at in regards to money, and what are you telling yourself? Is there a lack of deserving? Is there a lack of flow? Is there a stagnation? Is there giving too much away? Is there an unfocus? I had a conversation with my roommate, and I was saying to her, I can be really well. Okay, so I had a breakthrough in an EMDR session with my counselor about why I will always pay for things with people. I will constantly, if we go out for coffee, I will foot the bill, because I get an anxiety and feel very uncomfortable if you offer to. And I realized in talking to my counselor that in that moment when you go to pay, I get anxiety, And in order to calm the anxiety, I go, here, I'll pay, because I feel so good at making money, because I have so many different ways of making money, that I'd rather just worry about that later and make more money than have the feeling of anxiety. Now, what I learned in the EMDR session is that the feeling of anxiety comes from childhood, where I feel like I'm a burden. And that's really fascinating to me. So I don't have to go into that, but what I wanted to mention is that I'm having this conversation with my roommate, who is my best friend. We've been together for 9 years, as according to Facebook yesterday. And
Just in case
we
you
get
forgot.
along so well. It reminded me, yeah. One of the reasons we get along so well is that we are the rejected selves in each other. So she's so my in so many, but because we are two halves of the same person. And I said to her, I do this with money because I feel like I can go make more. I'm very well resourced. And she said, that's so interesting, because I've always felt like people owe me and they need to give me things because I have no capacity to resource myself. And I thought that's so fascinating. She has, and we've talked to her, she has this feeling of entitlement towards people giving her things. And so we've been exploring that, and she gets very overwhelmed by having multiple revenue streams. But then again, she does tons of different things a day, but it comes back to this feeling of, I can't do it, I'm incapable, that just stunts her ability from actually trying.
Yeah.
And for me, because I feel so resourced, I'm like, sure, let's get another job. I'm waiting to find out if I've got another job. I'm like, I'm only working 4 days a week. That means there's 3 days a week I could work. Let's do some work.
Yeah. And we all have a different pace and a different curiosity about different things that
Yes,
some people need to be frantically busy for really intense periods of time, and then they need to have nothing happen for ages.
Yeah.
And then
that's
it all starts up again. And one of the great things about getting the gray hair and getting older is that you can look back on your life and see, what were my patterns? What have my patterns been up until now?
I'm getting there. Yeah.
And
having students,
it's wonderful.
because
Yes. Oh, yeah.
such perspective on age, because as well as I do that, I think that the cosmic joke is, you don't feel like an adult, you don't feel like an adult, you don't feel like an adult. And then one day the realization is that you'll never feel like an adult. And that's when you are an adult.
Yes.
And so I'm constantly, I'm in these classes with students who are ranging from about 18 to, as I said, a few older than me, but predominantly mid 20s.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're the same age as me, and they're looking at me going, yes, professor, yes, professor. And I'm thinking in my head, like,
you don't know.
I
don't know that. I'm learning like you are. Yeah. Yeah.
But now I'm seeing them go through the same pattern that I've been through. And I go, oh my God, I've been there.
Yes. Been there, done that. Or, and maybe do it as well as they're doing it, right? Because each generation has something that they know how to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully that's our gift to generations.
So would you say that what's on your learning edge right now is learning or teaching? I'm the ideal person for these questions, because my greatest personal intention in life is personal growth. As you've probably gleaned from everything I've said, I'm obsessed with personal growth. I make a joke with I've got another best friend who's sort of the opposite of my first best friend, who's like the male version of me. We're opposite in masculine and feminine, whereas Amy and I are opposite. It's great. I love my life. It's amazing. But we always joke that the ultimate personal growth is to no longer strive for personal growth. And I get glimmers of moments of I don't need to grow. And then immediately I need to grow again. But to me, growing is fun.
Oh God, yes. It's the most fun thing I could possibly imagine. And that's how I can take on 7
That's not a burden to have to grow. To me,
I love it.
Oh, good. What can I learn about now? Mostly curiosity, because I think, that's interesting. Well, what happened if I did that? And what happens if I get together? So, and for some people, it's around tasks. For some people, it's around people. For me, it's around people. Everything comes back to relationship for me. You can take all the things away in my life. As long as I have people I can talk to, I'm okay.
I spent the first 30 years of my life having crippling social anxiety. And I've spent the last 7 in recovery from crippling social anxiety. And that's why I'm now living with my best friend.
Oh,
I've always lived alone other than with my partners. And my partner and I lived together recently, but we're being very modern at the moment.
yeah.
And I'm now, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it was funny. It's like as soon as I recovered from the anxiety, thinking I'm an introvert, I realized the introvert was actually the cover emotion for the anxiety, which was
Yeah.
much bigger. And I'm the biggest extrovert, and I think everything is relationships, like
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all that
Well,
matters.
we are communal creatures for the most part. I mean, some animals live in herds, and I don't know that any of them live all alone. Like,
No,
and
no,
we're
and I had a
animals on this planet, and we are communal animals, right? Which means that
we're
we learn from each other, we support each other, we keep each other
yeah.
warm, we hunt with one another, like we cultivate with one another. All of that is communal.
And we're in community with our environment as well. Like I'm in communion
Yes.
with my
Yes.
chair now that I'm sitting on, and it
Yeah.
supports me. And I
Yeah.
believe that we have spiritual relationships with inanimate objects through space and time.
Yep.
We keep, symbiotically, trees and us participate to keep each other alive and grow and thrive. And I don't think that anything in the universe, quantum, the basis of quantum mechanics is relationships. And I'm going to, Lucas, send
Yes.
you after this my favorite modern philosopher. His name is Daniel Schmachtenberger. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he does an
No.
excellent fire chat
Yep.
about it's like a metaphysical with quantum mechanic expression of the basis of the universe is attraction, which also speaks to the basis is relationships. And he talks about like, attraction in terms of, atoms coming together to form new things,
Yeah.
and attraction of people together to form new things. And, as a fractal, we're
Mm.
just expressing on a larger scale what's being expressed in a
Oh,
small scale, and also what's expressed on a universal scale. And here we are just
yeah.
growing and expanding and
Yeah.
creating.
Well, and I love that
Just
all that overlap between disciplines, right? And you would be getting that if you're
yeah,
teaching 7 different courses. There's Richard
yeah.
uh, Richard Fine Fine what was his name?
Feynman, there's
Feynman.
Feynman.
Yeah, he's a Nobel Prize winner, and
Yeah.
he used to take his summers and go and work in other departments at Stanford because he
Love
wanted to know what they
that.
were doing in other departments, right? Because he was always looking for what's the overlap. He was a curious man. He wrote a lovely autobiography called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman.
Oh my God.
And it's great. So when if you send me the link for that, I'll put it underneath this in the blog, and then if
Brilliant.
people are curious, they can go in and have a look. Um,
Brilliant.
I'm curious also to know, what do you do when you're in the place of great excitement around your learning edge, and also what do you do when you're in anxiety around it?
It's so funny you asked that, because I think the only two I think there's only two emotions on the spectrum, and one is excitement and anxiety, and they're actually the same emotion. It's perception that makes the difference.
Yeah. Yes. It
It's
is.
like
Yes.
again, just atoms. Everything is the same. It's all made out of the same stuff. It's just the
Yes.
expression of the vibration of it
Mhm.
that gives it that feeling of different.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the best advice I can give about anxiety, because I've spent so many years with debilitating anxiety, and one of my favorite things to do is work with students with anxiety and express that I recognize it, and just tell them my story if that's helpful.
Mhm.
Um, I think when we are having anxiety, what happens is your body has a feeling first. I really believe that feelings start in the body, and this happens so quickly you don't know what's happening. But you'll have a feeling in your body, which is manifesting as anxiety, and your brain immediately goes around trying to figure out what caused it.
Mhm.
And largely, anxiety is caused by either things that happened in our past or reoccurring patterns that we've interpreted in a certain way.
Yeah.
And so then we're correlating something in our present to things that have happened in our past, or a pattern we recognize.
Mhm.
And so it could be, oh, it must be you. It must be you. You've entered the room, and the anxiety got triggered. It's your fault. You are the problem, or people are the problem.
Mhm.
Whereas it's actually, I have a memory of where people have given me anxiety, and now I'm applying it to future experiences. And I think what I recommend for people to do when that feeling does come up is learn to separate the feeling from the thought. That's the first thing you do. And I'll tell it through an anecdote. Is I used to have an anxiety feeling in my body, and my brain would go taxes because I'm a business owner. It'd always be, I'm not done my taxes. My taxes are coming up. Do I have enough money for the taxes? It was taxes, 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 always taxes. I was terrified of taxes. And as I learned to separate the feeling from the thought, I simultaneously, I was able to just feel the anxiety apart from the thought. But I also had the thought that if taxes truly are causing anxiety, if I just do the taxes, then I should have no more anxiety. And what I learned was I have the anxiety regardless of whether the taxes are done. So as I separated that thought and stopped allowing my brain to dwell on taxes, I would just feel the feeling in my body, just accept that there's a feeling in my body of anxiety and just let it pass. And I'm still having a lot of anxiety in different areas of my life that I'm not always capable of doing this with. I'm not perfect. I haven't overcome anxiety altogether. One of them being that I have an incredible relationship with an amazing, enlightened person, but we have some attachment issues where I'm demonstrating as more anxious with him and he's demonstrating as more avoidant, whether or not we are like that with other people. And so our anxieties get triggered, and I haven't figured out how to completely get out of the body anxiety in that scenario. So I'm learning as well. But when there's excitement, I don't know, like, the hardest thing honestly to do is just slow down from rushing all in it and just gobbling it all up, right? It's just, you can't, like, I can't get enough of that. I
Is there
have
something good
I think
about gobbling it all up? Like, it doesn't sound like it's a bad thing to me.
well, like in this conversation, I get so excited about these conversations. I have to remind myself as you talk, like, slow down. Let the other person talk, slow down. You're excited, slow down. You don't have to say it all at once.
Yeah.
Slow down. Maybe there'll be a better
And
thing to
that there
say.
will be enough room to say everything, or that
Oh,
everything that you
I
want
know.
and need to say will have a
Yeah.
space. I
Yeah. Like you,
believe also, and I don't, I kind of play with it every once in a while, is that time, first of all, I say all the time, time and space are not what we think they are, but time is elastic
oh,
because it's also about perception. So we always have enough
yeah.
time for what it is. And I'm reminding myself of that because I'm moving next month and I'm packing my whole life into boxes and storing them for a while. Well, not my whole life. I'm packing my possessions into boxes. Me is going on the road, and that is both exciting and anxiety provoking at the same time. So I'm doing exactly what you're talking about, which is saying, oh, yeah, I noticed that I've got some anxiety there. And it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with how much I've managed to pack or how many things have been ticked off my to-do list or whatever it is. But also, I don't know if you find this when you're teaching, but when I'm having conversations with somebody, I hear things come out of my mouth and I think, oh yeah, I needed to remind myself of that.
Oh, funny. I'm going to do that from now on. That's great.
Because
That's
you're
great.
saying things to me right now, and I'm thinking, oh, yeah, that's a good one. Oh, yeah, I need to remember that one. And then I'm also, when I say time is elastic, I'm thinking, oh, yeah, I needed to remind myself that time is elastic because I get because there's all this, look, you can see all the boxes and stuff around me but that it's all going to be graceful and it's going to be in flow, and we live in community, and community pulls in and supports us to the degree that we invite it and accept it,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? Anxiety is often an indication that there's either something unknown there, which is very exciting because we've determined that we no longer live in the forest with, bears and tigers that are going to kill us. We have a lot of safety in the environment.
Yeah.
The other cause of anxiety is that there's something unknown about ourselves, that there's something unhealed in our past that we can also go into. And there's no bears and tigers in our past because our past is in the past. So
And
anxiety,
sometimes it's a combination of both, right?
yeah, it gets
Something
me excited.
inside and outside, because as within, so without, etc. So it's like if I can't see it
About
inside me, I'm going to see it outside me. And if I can't see it outside me, I'm going to see it inside.
Well, and my partner has said it to me, like, that's why we came together, is to trigger each other like this so that we can recognize this in ourselves and grow past it. And I couldn't agree with him more. My EMDR session with my counselor wouldn't have come up if my partner and I weren't living separately, like right now. And I just feel my whole life has changed since that session. I actually ironically had to see my parents the same day right after the session. And usually when I leave my parents, I love them, but I would just want to like go have a drink and just leave the world and, you know, take the day off. I can't handle anything.
Yeah.
And I just had such a great conversation with them. I couldn't wait to do it again. And then I was really curious if that was going to last or if that was a one-off occasion. And I've seen them one more time since, and I had the same feeling again. I really loved spending the time with them. And I must have had the feeling of I'm a burden coming up every single time I see my parents, which is what triggers me to want the escapism when I leave, that I'm just so filled with this emotion of I'm a burden, and it's so suppressed that I don't even realize it's there.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't my partner triggering me in the little ways he does, I would never know.
Oh yeah. And also
Yeah.
I think that if we change, people change, they have to change how they react to us because we've changed. So they're reacting to something that is not what they normally encounter when they're with us. So in physics,
Wow.
they call that field theory, right? If you change one element of the field, you would change the entire field. It makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and also your perception of the field, like
Yeah.
when you change the medium that you're seeing through, which is all of these internal belief structures and expressions and anxiety, excitements.
Yeah.
And when you change those, you change your fundamental patterns of belief, then you're actually looking through different eyes as well.
Yes. You are
Everything changes.
altering
Yeah.
your selfness. You're rearranging your molecules, basically.
Yeah. I love
And
that.
how
Yes.
wonderful
Yeah. And
when we realize that we can do that.
wow. Oh, well,
That
and
we're
that's why I'm
really a
so
different person every day, right? Because I mean, they say that the slowest replacing cells in our body replace themselves every 7 years. I think that's our bones. So really, we're a new person, a completely new physical person every 7 years.
beautiful. Oh, aren't we lucky? Aren't we lucky for that?
Yeah, yeah,
I'm so
yeah,
lucky.
yeah. So I have one last question for you, which is now that you're not um, sewing things, we know you're
Well, I
knitting.
am.
Oh, you are still sewing things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But go on.
Well, I do remember. I remember you telling me that you sewed pockets into things in
I
hidden
have.
places.
I I have. I don't generally sew pockets, not to say I couldn't or wouldn't sew pockets
No,
into
no.
things that already exist. I just
Yeah, yeah,
generally tend to put a lot of pockets in a lot of things
yeah.
when I'm designing. And I remember the last time we talked, I think I just made underwear with pockets.
Yes, yes. And I remember thinking, not that I wanted or needed underwear with pockets necessarily, but I liked the out of the box thinking around
Yeah.
it. You know, it
Yeah. Well,
appealed
and
to
part of
me.
it was in pop culture, there was this massive pushback against why women's clothing doesn't have pockets, and it's so sexist and on, which is absurd, to be honest. Like, as a person who works in the field, it's
Yeah,
not sexist. It's because companies are trying to undercut each other to sell
yeah.
products for as little as possible. And you
Yes.
wouldn't believe how compounding adds to the
Yeah,
value, the retail price of a garment. And
yeah,
pockets can really increase, you know, it could almost possibly in some cases double the price of a dress when it
yeah,
hits the store.
yeah.
And men just tend to not have the same uh, shopping habits as women. Not to say they never do, they're actually becoming more similar over time.
Yeah.
But it was because of financial reasons, not for
Yeah.
sexist reasons, that women's
Yeah.
clothing doesn't have pockets. But that being said, with a lot of that being in pop culture, my
Yeah.
response as a designer was, what can we put
Let's
pockets in?
put
Let's
pockets
put
in.
pockets on.
Yeah. Yeah.
How many pockets can we
Yeah.
put on it? Let's
Yeah.
find out what the limit
Which
is.
comes
Where do
back to
people
this
want
idea of the absurd, right?
the
You go
absurd? This is
into the
totally okay.
absurdity and then you pull back and you find a place where it
Yeah.
really works.
Oh my God, that
Um,
was too many pockets. Too many pockets on things. You too many pockets.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then, there's all kinds of pockets. There's patch pockets, there's inseam pockets, there's hidden pockets, there's, yeah, all the whole thing.
Absolutely. Yes. What a great memory. Just my absurdity. That's something I've always explored. And it's actually something I have to be really careful of as a designer, because I am so absurd and I like to test the limits in this way for the sake of making discoveries. I feel like I am sort of like, an explorer going out in the world of design. The
Yeah.
problem is that I can often be perceived as being silly or not taking things seriously as a clothing designer, because I do believe that my clothing is serious and I'm trying to make something that that
Yeah.
lasts, that
Yeah.
is sustainable, that's something you'll love forever. I'm not trying to make something goofy. I'm not trying to recreate the pet rock.
Yeah.
But I'm happy the pet rock exists because it taught us a lot about people's intentions and meanings. And so, yeah, I have to be very careful about the way I'm perceived.
That was my
Okay.
era, the era of the pet rock. Um,
Yeah. Oh,
and
it's
it was
honestly brilliant.
it released this bubble of creativity into the world and laughter.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly. And
it was
yeah,
more than just a silly thing that people threw their money at. It was an evolution into something.
I 100% agree with you on that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was a brilliant idea. And I think that's how the pet rock will forever be perceived by the majority as something absurd and a ridiculous way to spend your money. But for designers, for entrepreneurs, for people who are learning at the cutting edge,
Yeah.
it was something that really pushed culture and paradigms forward. It was a new belief system. And I think that the people who purchased it, maybe they were just doing it out of silliness and throwing money away. But I think that overall, it was investing in interesting ideas and saying that we don't have to always be practical. We can do something different. And it also kind of, gave a weird solution to a problem of people living lives in different ways than they had previously, and maybe not being able to afford financially or time-wise pets like they had in the past, and looking for companionship. So I think there was a huge cultural shift. I think you could probably write a great master's thesis on the pet rock.
I think so.
Um,
Yes. And what was
yeah,
going on in the world at the time that all happened, right? They
exactly.
came in a little
Yeah,
box. But Cabbage Patch dolls were a little bit like that. This idea of, it comes with a birth certificate and it has a name. And I mean, people went wild for them, and they were ugly little baby dolls, but they,
exactly.
but it was a phenomenon, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And it really felt like something that was my own. I remember being that right age and just something I could cherish, and it was precious.
Yes.
It wasn't simple. And I mean, I was obviously very young, so I didn't understand the meaning of commodity, but it wasn't just another toy.
Yeah.
It was, and I think that, I really wish now that we had this conversation before my thesis was over, because this really connects with my thesis. And I should have included Cabbage Patch dolls in it. I was talking about the relationships we have with our textile objects, and how we can create deeper, more meaningful connections with our textile objects in order for them to last longer, and that we can achieve sustainability, real sustainability at some point. So cute.
This is an egg, and it
It
comes
is an egg.
from a children's storybook that's called What Do You Do
Oh,
with an Idea? And it's written by a guy down in Seattle. And his Kobe Yamada, his name is, and we had him on the show. But
oh,
my
great.
brother gave me the storybook, which is beautifully illustrated, gave me the storybook for my 54th birthday.
Oh,
And I loved it so much that I went and looked for the guy on the internet, and I found him, and I wrote to him and I said, I have a radio show. Would you come on the radio show? And he said, oh yeah, not only would I come on the radio show, but I'm going to be in Vancouver. My wife is running a marathon and I can come and
wow.
be on it in person. And so we did. But this, I like this. It doesn't have a face and it's got these weird little chicken legs. But it's also about an idea that won't leave you alone. It just won't leave you.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about thinking outside the box, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that he was a writer of children's books. I don't think he'd written children's books before that. But this is I mean, I don't have things like textile things like that around me, but this
Have
one
you?
speaks to me. What was that?
You got a room full of pillows there.
Oh yeah, that I have, but I don't have affection for like this. This has a concept around it, and
Well,
I have affection.
that's what my thesis was about. Like, why? How? First, the question is it even something that we want? Is to develop affection for all of our goods? That's a huge
Yeah, yeah,
question.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Thing is, what's that different than the pillows that are around you? What makes
yeah,
any of our textile objects
yeah,
different from any other?
yeah.
And a
What
lot of
gives
it
it
is
meaning,
free.
right?
Yeah.
Those
So that's
cushions could have belonged to a grandparent or something, and they might have a lot of meaning to. Like I'm really doing this sifting and sorting right now because I'm
yeah.
deciding what do I keep and put in storage
Yeah.
and pay for, and what do I give away.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that I can. So I'm thinking talking about at the leading edge of learning. I'm hoping to eventually be able to write a couple books, and one will be for so-called consumers, which I actually is not a term I mind, and the other ones will be for the creators. And I'm thinking along the lines of moving into a paradigm that is relatable to the Marie Kondo fad, except it's not about holding objects and seeing if they bring you pleasure and then getting rid of them or keeping them. I want people to be able to do that before they bring them into their lives in the first place.
Yes, I like that
And
idea. Yeah.
I'm looking at from my experiences with my thesis as designers, we can't design relationships or meaning into objects. We really can't, but we can design for people to facilitate that better. And I think that it's really important for designers, if they want to create long-term meaningful things, that they have to have a relationship with those things and the people that, and let's say the consumers, throughout the entire life cycle of the thing. From the time it's conceived of, the time it's designed, the storytelling through the so-called marketing of it, but they also have to be connecting and having that storytelling throughout the life of the item. So throughout the experience you have with it. And we know that the majority of the life cycle of an item actually happens in the phase where you own it. It's not happening in the design phase. The design phase will just facilitate whether or not that is going to last longer or shorter.
Yep.
And then going through that is still maintaining that connection and having the connection and the story through to the end of it. And that's how I think that we can say, turn those pillows into something that you didn't just buy at Pier 1. It's something that you actually connect to. And it's something I've been saying the whole time I've had my company. I said it last time I was talking to you, and I said it in my TED talk, is we should only be having things in our life with meaning.
Yes.
I'm curious, and I haven't answered yet, because this part I can only speak for myself, but I think the world would be a better place if we only had things that had meaning.
And when they cease to have meaning, they should go on. They should move on to someone who finds meaning in them.
Yeah, well, and I don't have a problem with that, because it's not like we are going to settle on having, and it wasn't realistic for me either. I tried to look at my wardrobe and pick out anything I'd stopped wearing, and just say, why am I not wearing it? Just start wearing it again. Yeah. And I have a perfect pair of pants, an example. They have a print on them, and I adore them. I actually listed them on Facebook Marketplace today. I absolutely adore them, but I don't personally like wearing printed bottoms. Like I never have. I think pants are the most beautiful pants I've ever seen, but I can't stand prints on my legs.
So they need to go to somebody who loves print on their legs.
Yeah, exactly. So this isn't going to work for me, and we have to pass them on. It is just a matter of fact. And it's the same way that, you can break up with your partner. It doesn't mean that they're going in the garbage. They just need to go to the right home.
Yes, exactly. And be celebrated by somebody else who finds them exactly the right person for them at that time.
The story then should track with that as well. And we need to find ways of carrying meaning. And I think that there's so much that sits outside of the purview of my thesis. The thesis is only a 2-year project, and it had a large scope to begin with. But I think about cultures like Japanese culture that really have a lot of meaning and a lot more symbolism in a lot of the so-called products they have. And so creating that meaning, creating the openness, creating the space for meaning at the design phase and the production phase, and then facilitating the storytelling and the connectivity and the community throughout the use phase, and then somehow enabling that transition to another person, and then having that storytelling at the end of life and controlling where it goes. Does it go back into the cycle as a circular object? We call that circular economy, where it doesn't go into the garbage, but we reuse, we recycle. Yeah. Or we even telling the end of life as we do dispose of it in a responsible manner, so that people understand how, we don't actually live in a linear economy. Nothing's linear. Everything comes back to you. We live in a closed loop system. I don't believe in linear. I think circularity is the way it is. The difference between using the term circularity and just simply living and ignoring it is actually doing it effectively.
Yeah. So and consciously. This to me is about
Yes, this is all about, this is all conscious living. This is all the be here
Yes.
now. This is the awareness. And so I'd invite everybody to look through their room or look at themselves and look at the things that they have no meaning with, like that they have no connection to, and sit in meditation with that and really see the spirituality of how that thing came into their life and why it's there. My partner came over yesterday and brought these cans of coconut water. And I don't really have much of a connection to this can, but it is beautiful. It's got a lovely, he brought me flowers. If you think about it, my boyfriend brought me flowers. Look,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah,
and how beautiful and pure this is, and who made this, and where did it come from, and what does this
yeah.
represent, and how special is
And
this to
who
me? And
decided to put the ripples on the tin
yeah,
and make it
and
that
I
height and color
yeah, and I
and
don't want
yeah,
to, I'm not suggesting people hold on to their coconut water cans.
no,
But if you're
no.
going to welcome coconut water into your life and thus the can it's carried in, you
Mhm.
should offer appreciation to that and thank the world for creating this out of the energy, not finite, there is no limit, but the energy has a cost to it as it's turned into a can. And
Mhm.
it's not something that I really should be indulging in every day, but it's something I should really be thankful for and really enjoy the experience of.
Well, if it comes into your life, you should make the most of it before it goes out of your life again, right? With a flower on it. And it's spring. And we have lots of flowers around here. All the magnolias are out on my street right now. And it's just gorgeous. Just gorgeous. Well, I have to let you go because we're reaching the limit of the time that we have available today. But it's been such a pleasure to reconnect with you again and to see you
Yeah.
in your new space because it feels like it's pregnant with possibility. So we'll see what
Oh,
you're
indeed.
going to birth while you're in this house.
You'd be surprised. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic.
Well,
So this is going to be a black toque that you're knitting.
well, it's actually green. I'm being backlit, so you
Oh,
can't see, but it's like,
it's dark green.
yeah, it's dark green.
Ah,
But
yes,
anyway,
yes.
if anybody needs a toque, they need to befriend me in about the next 4 months, and they'll likely get a toque.
Get a toque, and then you'll move on to knitting something else.
Then I'll get back to doing something more serious. And what I'd like to do is
Yeah,
exactly that life cycle that I was telling you, designing things for meaning.
yeah,
So
yeah,
there'll be wearable artwork, big, very consuming, probably cradle to cradle production, like making things. I have a rabbit, so like making out of her hair. So they will be expensive,
yeah.
but
But there'll
I
be
don't really
art.
have a problem with that. If you're only buying one sweater instead of
Oh, yeah.
10,
Oh, yeah.
hypothetically, even if
Absolutely.
eight,
Yeah,
it would still be saving
yeah,
money.
yeah. I'm
Yeah.
thinking about that right now because I'm traveling with just a carry-on. And so you get very, very deliberate and thoughtful about what you put in there.
I'm so excited for you. I'm
Carry
looking
it.
forward to
So,
hearing.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's exciting.
We'll talk more about that.
We will.
I'll follow your.
And I would love to be on your mailing list because when you start
Oh
putting
yeah.
these things together, I'm imagining a website that describes it all and
Right.
where you showcase all these items. And so I would love that just tickles my fancy.
You're
So
in.
yeah, and you can let me know when that's up and I will add it to the bottom of this vlog so that anybody who
Right.
listens to this and is inspired by it will be able to come back and hook into it. So if anybody
Absolutely.
is interested in having further conversations with you or wants to connect with you, how do they reach you?
I'm very easy to find. I'm not hiding. My company is Devil May Wear. So Instagram is Devil May Wear. Email is Devil May Wear at Gmail. Facebook's Devil May Wear store. My personal is Steph Ostler. I just use Devil May Wear for everything else, but I'll send you the link so nobody has to memorize anything.
Okay, lovely. That's wonderful. So
Thank
thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much for being with me today. And as I sign off on everything I do, remember that you too can speak intuition.
Thank you.